Don't worry about that little guy.
Hey guys, what's going on? So you haven't seen me in forever. And the reason you haven't seen me in forever is because Jeeps, they're just coming and they're not stopping. That was gross. Get your head out of the gutter. These things are showing up from all over the place. This one here happens to be from Miami, Florida, and it was shipped up here because the owner was concerned with some of the things that were going on with it that he was unaware of when he bought it. So I was given an amazing idea by my last customer, who is also a YouTuber, goes by the name of the Blacktop Boondocker. I'll link his channel down in the description so you can check him out. There were a lot of unknowns when you're buying these things. And so I thought we would do a video where it would kind of be like a 97 to 06 Jeep Wrangler buyer's guide. What to look out for when you purchase these things, or what to look out for before you purchase them. Does mileage matter? Does the condition of the body matter? Does overall condition matter? I mean, we're gonna go over a ton of stuff in this video, and a ton of stuff that you need to watch out for before you purchase one of these things. And I'm also gonna tell you right off the rip that there are a lot of problems with these Jeeps that you can feel comfortable purchasing one even if it has that problem, because that problem is very easy to rectify. So we're gonna go through step by step on what I think is a good deal, what's a bad deal, and what to look out for. And the Jeep behind me is a perfect example of what to look out for when you're buying something used. Okay, so if you hear me sniveling a lot in this video, you're gonna have to just deal with it, because the weather outside, it's sunny, raining, snowing, cold, warm, and it might be windy or completely calm. We don't know. The weather's changing literally by the minute. 1 minute it's snowing, 1 minute it's raining. So the air inlet unit on the front of my face is just leaking profusely. So you're gonna have to deal with that. But first things first, 97 to 06 Jeep Wranglers. Arguably the most popular Wrangler that's ever been designed to this date. Some purists still love the CJs. The YJ is just a complete and utter disaster because of the square headlights. Nobody liked the square headlights. Drove everybody up a wall. TJ came out, coil sprung, solid axles, a wealth of options, including the Rubicon models. Just an overall great, capable machine. Now, with that being said, 97 to 06 had their share of issues. And I'm sure if you guys have watched my videos, you know the frame is the #1 issue on these things. But we're gonna get into some of the other things to look out for besides the frame, because the frame isn't the only problem that these things had. And it also isn't the only thing to look out for when you're buying one of these. So before we get to the frame, which I'll show you, we're gonna go over a few things. There's probably 5 or 10 different things that we can go over that will get you a little bit more informed when buying a Jeep. The first one, and the one I hear a lot, on these particular models, mileage doesn't matter. As a matter of fact, the higher the mileage, the better off these things are. Why that is, I don't know, but that has been the track record for everything that comes in here. Any Jeep that's got ultra low mileage on it has not been driven, therefore it's sat a ton. And when we get them in here and they have 60 or 70 or 80,000 miles on them and they're 20 plus years old, every seal is leaking. Every part of that thing is rotted because it sat in someone's backyard. So don't go looking for low mileage Wranglers. Stay in the 100,000 plus mile 97 to 06s, because truthfully, the more that they're driven, the more they're washed, hopefully, the better off the rot situation is, the better off the seals are, the better off the engine is. So don't go after the low mileage ones. Stay, in the average mileage ones. So if you figure average is about 10 to 20,000 miles per year, if the vehicle's 20 years old, you're probably not going to see 400,000 miles on one of these things. But on average, I've seen 150 to 250,000 miles on them, and they're totally fine. Anything lower than that, you run the risk that they were sitting outside somewhere and just rotting into the ground. Any more than that, and you're going to need to start looking into replacing some of the mechanical parts of the Jeep. But again, not a big deal. All right, second thing you need to be looking for, 97 to 02. Is one run of the TJ. 03 to 06 was another run. There are some slight differences, and you're gonna wanna know what those are before you get them. All right, so the differences between the 97 to 02 and the 03 to 06 are very small, but they're significant. The first one was transmission choices. You could go from the AX15 in the 97 to 02s, which is a 5-speed manual transmission, to the NV3550, which is also a 5-speed, but a newer style transmission. It actually shifted a little bit smoother. It had a much nicer feel with the shifter. And then also too, I believe 03 to 06, you could get a 6-speed manual transmission behind the same 4-liter 6-cylinder. Some of the other differences in the 97 to 02s was 97 and 98 had distributors, spark plug wires, the whole 9 yards. 99 and above had coil on plug. So some differences there. Nothing really to sway you in either direction, with the exception of the fact that the 03 to 06 was updated a little bit. They used a newer, smaller Mercedes steering box in them. They changed the frame a little bit. They changed the skid plates a little bit. They added an extra skid plate under the transmission for the automatics. And there were a few other little odds and ends that they did with the 03 to 06 to try to improve upon. The interior is a little bit better. Some of the features were a little bit better. You had the Rubicon model that you could get, which had Dana 44s front and rear, had electronic lockers front and rear, had a 4-to-1 transfer case. The Rubicons are kind of like the ones that everybody wants, but they're very expensive even still. And if you can find one, it's most likely been wheeled insanely. It's been in the woods because that's what it was meant for. So I would say probably stay away from the Rubicon unless you can find one in really good condition. But then if you find one in really good condition, it's got ultra low mileage and it's going to need a ton of work because it's been sitting for too long. So just some things to look out for. Those are the differences between the 97 to 02 and the 03 to 06. Not a ton, but enough that it may sway your decision a little bit. Service history. Service history is a very important part of buying any used vehicle. If it has a very well documented service history, you're probably going to have a very good, reliable vehicle. If it has the service history of, oh yeah, I did an oil change on it in my backyard, I replaced the engine, I replaced all the axles, but I lost all the paperwork. If you get that kind of vehicle, then you don't really know what you're getting into. So Carfax at times can be helpful, but Carfax doesn't have all of the information. Like if you do your own oil changes in your backyard, you do your brakes in your garage, you do all that stuff, none of that gets uploaded to Carfax. So when you pull a Carfax report, it could be the only times that the machine ever went to the dealer or to a garage that reports to Carfax, and that can be an issue. You know, sometimes when you run a Carfax report, it looks completely clean, but yet you don't see all of the other stuff that was done to the vehicle outside of a legitimate shop. So that's one thing to look out for. Make sure you have good service history on it. Another is a really simple one, but I see this a lot. So you know that these 4-liter engines, and if it has a 2.5-liter 4-cylinder, let's get this out of the way. If it's got the 4-cylinder in it, walk away from it because it's useless. If it's got the 6-cylinder in it, hang around, ask some questions. The 4-liter was a pretty much indestructible motor. It's been around forever. However, the one killer of these engines is synthetic oil. The older models in 97 to 02 required a 10W30 oil. The newer 03 to 06s were allowing you to go to a 5W30 oil to try to help with gas mileage. It thins the oil out, lowers the oil pressure, and ultimately you can get better gas mileage with it, so they say. The problem with the 03 to 06 is that when you run a synthetic 530 in it, the oil film strength is too thin. And what ends up happening is by the time 03 and 06 came around, the castings for the block were so out of spec at this point because they were at the end of their line, and this motor had been manufactured for 50 years. So the castings for the blocks were terrible and they were loose. So now the pistons fit in the bore loosely, and without the film strength, the pistons slap around in the bore. For any of you that have a Wrangler, you know every now and then you start it up, you get this little clack and then it goes away. Well, that's piston slap. That's the skirt on the piston hitting the piston wall, hitting the cylinder wall, and making a little bit of noise. Now, if you run synthetic, you lose the extra film strength of a conventional oil. Then you're down at 530, so you're running a thinner oil, and the piston starts to slap around in the bore, and then it breaks the piston skirt off, and you have to replace either the piston or have the motor rebuilt or put another motor in it. So if you go up and you go to buy one and the guy says, oh, I've changed it with synthetic oil its entire life, don't buy it. You want the guy who's been putting 10W30, 2050, 1040, whatever Walmart stuff he can get his hands on. That's the engine that's going to run for the rest of its days. Because for some reason, these Jeeps, you could put used oil back in them, they run mint. You pour synthetic in it and the pistons come apart. So another thing to really look at when you're going to buy one of these things, if it's had synthetic oil changes, that's not a good thing. That's not something you say, oh wow, this guy really took care of it. Well, no, he was misinformed and actually caused a problem with it. So don't do that. 10W30 conventional, no matter what year it is. Okay, so now that we got that out of the way and we figured out, you know, what are some of the things you should be looking for? These things can be done just doing it online. You can look online and read the descriptions. All the stuff we just talked about will be in that description most likely, and you can kind of get an idea of what you're going to take a look at. Now, with all that being said, what we're going to do is I'm going to take you over to this Jeep and I'm going to show you the main problem areas that you're going to need to literally grab yourself a screwdriver, take to whenever you go to look at the vehicle, and just start poking around, because this will tell you a ton. And this is going to tell you exactly what you should pay for this vehicle. This is going to tell you if you should even bother buying this vehicle or if you should just walk away. So I'm going to grab a hold of the camera. We're going to walk over to this Jeep and we're going to take a screwdriver with us, and I'm going to show you some of the areas of concern that you need to be looking for when you buy these things. Okay, so the very, very first thing you want to look at is the frame, obviously. This one's been cleaned up a little bit so that we could get to work on it, but what you're going to want to look for is any type of rubberized undercoating. Rubberized undercoating is the devil, and I've done a video on that stuff, and you can actually see some of it here. It just literally flakes right off because it was not applied correctly. If it's got a coating of rubberized undercoating on it, run. Just walk away from it, find another one. You're not going to like the outcome. Number two, here are the areas that you need to be looking in. So right above this rear lower control arm, in this spot right where it connects to the frame, take something pointy and just start tapping on it, because what you'll find is that with a little bit of force, you can actually punch right through that frame. And right there, if it's that bad right there, it's going to be 10 times worse on the inside. Then once you find that area, if that looks solid, you come all the way back here to the rear section by the bumper, and you do the same thing. You start poking around, and then ultimately you'll find that you're probably going to have some holy areas here. Now, what's interesting about this one is, you see that right there? That's tape and a piece of metal and a little bit of Bondo. So they Bondoed that and left all of that stuff inside. So you see that? Probably run away. Next part is the center section where the skid plate goes. So right in this area, you can see that this one has been repaired before. You can see the welds are not the greatest. There's some porosity in there. It's not welded at the top. It is welded here. But the biggest problem that we have with this previous repair is that they did not cut out the old section of frame. The old half of the frame that's all rotted and disgusting is still sitting right underneath here, which means that all of this repair in another year would be completely gone. It would be rotted just as bad. Another thing you can look out for too is on each side there's 3 bolts. Each one of those 3 bolts holds on that skid plate. That skid plate looks all brand new and shiny because it is brand new and shiny, because the other one rotted out and fell off of the vehicle. So they fixed whatever it was they could and didn't do it properly. So if you come over here to the front body mount, you can see there's holes there. Super tough without the light. See, there's a hole right there. Even after it's been repaired, there's still a hole there. And then if we come to the front, this is another area that you need to be looking at. Right above the lower control arm. Man, this camera's getting heavy. Right above the lower control arm again, take yourself something pointy and you can literally knock all the Bondo out. Because a lot of used car dealers like to do that little Bondo trick. And now you can see how big of a hole we just opened up in there. So this mount was about to fall out of the vehicle. A few more miles and it would have fell out of the vehicle. So then we've got holes here, we've got this here. All of this that's down in here is the metal that was here before and was never cut out properly. So that's just going to rot away even further. So we got to cut all that stuff out. So those are the main key areas to look at for the frame. Right above the front lower control arm, right above the rear lower control arm, at the very back by the bumper. And then lastly on the frame, this one's kind of hard to get to, so you guys are going to have to kind of crawl around a little bit, but right up in this area here. This one doesn't look too bad, but I bet you we could pop a hole in it. Let's see. So right at this upper control arm mount on the inside of the frame, yeah, look at that. No problemo. It looked completely fine, but it's got a big hole in it now. So that's another area on both the passenger side and the driver's side. Driver's side looks a little bit better, but yeah, driver's side's a little bit more solid than the passenger side was. But that is another area to look for. And you'll have to kind of do some crawling around to really get under it and look. Those are the main areas of the frame that really need your attention. And again, like, you know, this is another one on the driver's side here. We got all this stuff right here. And that will all need to be repaired. And there's actually a crack that runs all along right here where it needs to be repaired. So there's that. Okay, so now as far as the body goes, some things to look out for is look up underneath the fender here and see if you've got any crazy rust or rot happening under there. It's a pretty common issue with these TJs is they rot right at that seam right there. They tend to get a little soft and it rots through the top and whatever, but that's really not that big of a deal. You can get a set of, you know, new OEM fenders for a couple $100 a piece, or you can put a set of tube fenders on it and not have to worry about it. These actually look pretty good on this one because, like I said, it's a Florida vehicle. Next step in the body is the outer tub shell itself, or this area here where those little guys are. A lot of times they'll rot in that area and then people will cover them up. And this one you can kind of see it if you look really, really close. Right in between there. There we go. Right in between there, there's a nice little rot hole in the body. You can see light through. So that's something to look for. If it's been covered up, then there's probably a hole there. Again, not a huge issue. You can buy these side panels, you can repair it, you can do whatever. The body rot is not that great of a concern. Now we go up in here and we can see that, yeah, there's stuff you can see and you shouldn't be able to see anything there because they're supposed to be metal, but that happens. So not a huge, you know, I wouldn't consider that a deal breaker, but it's definitely something you can, you know, maybe work on the price a little bit because you found that. And then the next section are what we call the torque boxes. These are what give the floor of the vehicle rigidity, and it's this whole section right along in here. And if you're looking carefully, you'll see that these have been repaired because they have a tendency to rot, and it's mostly this center one. The one in the center of the body is the one that rots the most. Let me see if this one doesn't have any rot on it. Yeah, this one doesn't have any rot yet, but the majority of these things rot on that center one, and then they start to rot in the back where you saw on the other side, whereas this is what it's supposed to look like. So if you find that, again, not a huge deal, but it's something that you can probably work on the price a little bit and say, hey, you know, I found these rot holes, it's going to cost me X amount to get it fixed, can you take some cash off of the price? And most times you'll get it. Yeah, inside of the frame's looking pretty wonderful. So a lot of times on the inside of the frame you can see it. So again, if the body is a little in rough shape and body's a little bit rotted, then, you know, I wouldn't worry about it too much because the bodies on these things are cheap to fix and cheap to replace. There's another little spot up in the back corner that tends to rot out. But it's not a deal breaker because most people are buying these things to go have fun with them. As long as the frame is solid, then you don't really have to worry about the body all that much because it's not a big deal. Not a big deal at all. Okay, and the last thing that I really need you guys to look out for is suspension. So there's a lot of these Jeeps that are lifted, obviously. And you might think to yourself, you know what? I'd like to buy one that's already lifted because I don't know that much about vehicles and I don't want to spend the money or the time to put in a lift. I'll just buy one that's already lifted. Well, there's a problem with that. Most of these Jeeps that are already lifted have been lifted by someone in their backyard who went the budget route and bought all budget equipment, and now everything is wrong. So the Jeep's lifted 4.5 inches. They didn't do any of the relocation brackets. They didn't do any of the proper control arms. They didn't do any of that. So now your track width is off, your wheelbase is off, your steering is off, your alignment's off. And the thing basically, you know, crab walks as it goes down the road because it just wasn't done properly. So this Jeep is actually a really good example of a lift that was done correctly. And because it was done correctly, this Jeep rides amazing, but it's something to look out for. This Jeep has roughly 4.5, 5 inch lift on it, and it looks to be all rough country judging by the color, which again is a very good lift, but they did the extended shocks like they were supposed to, the extended sway bar links, the drop bracket for the front track bar, the drop pitman arm to correct the steering angle. They did, in the front, they did adjustable upper control arms and adjustable lower control arms to bring the track width back to where it should be. In the rear, adjustable lowers, adjustable uppers, as well as the track bar relocation bracket and everything else that is needed to lift this vehicle properly, including the extended rear sway bar links. This one was done 100% correct, which is amazing because it's rare that I actually see that. I don't see, you know, lift kits of this size so that it can run 35s done correctly. And that causes all sorts of wacky problems because you guys probably can't see it in this picture. Or maybe you can a little bit. The rear end right now is actually pushed over that way a bunch because of how the rear end is sitting right now. And if you don't use a track bar to correct that, then you end up with major issues and it crab walks down the road and you got all kinds of problems. So check that out. If it's already lifted and it's lifted 2.5 inches, then you don't need any of this adjustable stuff. You can do a 2.5 inch lift without having to do anything other than drop the transfer case an inch to set the driveline properly. This one also, because of the tall lift, has the slip yoke eliminator kit, which gets rid of the slip yoke right here in the end of the transfer case, gives you a double carbon U-joint here, and then gives you a little bit longer of a slip yoke in the drive shaft itself instead of actually at the transfer case. This corrects the driveline, as well as does the adjustable control arms. Those also can correct any sort of driveline vibration you may have. And just to be on the safe side, they still went with a 1 inch drop on the transfer case just to make sure that everything is good. So this Jeep was done correctly. This lift was done correctly, and whomever did it, nice job. So that's another thing to be looking for. Look at your suspension stuff. Make sure that whoever did the lift was doing it correctly, because otherwise you could be opening up a can of worms. And at that point, you might as well just find a really good place to have it done and do it, or order all the correct parts and do it yourself. Okay, so now that we got that out of the way, let's talk about the cost to repair some of these issues so that you can go into your deal knowing exactly what things are gonna cost you if it's, let's just say, a Jeep that you fell in love with and you have to have it. Well, now you'll know the cost of things. So the frame repair can range, and this is just from my experience and what I charge for my customers, the frame repair can run, and this is super broad, but at a minimum, $3,000. At the high end of things, if it's front, middle, and rear that needs to be fixed, you're talking close to $8,000 to get the frame done. Now, you might just say, well, put a new frame in it. Why wouldn't you just put a new frame in it? Well, a new frame, there's one company that makes them. That frame is $5,000. Then there's about $1,000 worth of shipping. And then there's probably another $5,000 in labor to put the frame in, because you're gonna break every bolt in this thing getting it apart. So that's usually not a great option, because then at that point you're into it for 10 or 15 grand versus being into it for 3 to 8, you know, depending on frame. But the average in my shop that I see is right around the $3,500 mark. That's about what it costs to get that frame situated. So if you're in the Northeast area and you find one with a rotted frame and you're looking at it and you see that, oh, it's only the sections that are by the, you know, by the lower control arms that are bad, you're probably looking at about $3 grand to $3,500 to get that fixed. So you can go into the deal knowing that, hey, this guy wants $5 grand for this Jeep, but it's gonna cost me $3 to get it fixed. or $4 to get it fixed. So how about, you know, we work a deal. I'll give you $2,500 or $3,000 for the Jeep. Then you can spend the $3,000 to have the frame repaired, and then you know what's good. And then at that point, you can budget out your deal and see what it's worth to you. Some people will pay stupid money for these things. And some people know the value of them and aren't going to spend that kind of money. But that's what you can do. As far as the body stuff goes, the body stuff, body shops are ridiculous. We don't do any kind of body work here, but body shops are crazy. So as far as rust goes on these things, the body rot can be hidden with very inexpensive panels. Like you see right above my head right there, that black panel along the rocker. Those hide rust holes very nicely. So you can get in there and you can clean that rust up, throw a little rust converter on it, and then put a panel over top of it for $100. And that solves your rot problem. It solves the rust problem. You don't have to worry about it. You don't have to see it. It looks fine. So you know, a few $100 off the asking price, $1,000 off the asking price for a body rot, whatever. You can work that into your deal. The next thing, obviously, service history. Service history is important. One of the two things that would make me walk away from the sale of a Jeep is if the frame is coated in undercoating and I can punch through it with a screwdriver. And two, if the engine has been treated poorly its entire life, i.e. synthetic oil changes. You know, people that do synthetic oil changes think on these they can go 10,000 miles on an oil change. That's even worse. But then again, too, you can go to a salvage yard or anywhere in the country and buy one of these 4-liter 6-cylinders for anywhere from $3,000 to $1,000 with no miles on them, or high miles on them, or good running end, or whatever. They're everywhere. So that's another thing to consider. If the motor's got a knock, oh man, the guy's probably only gonna want $2,500 for the thing in the first place. And if the frame is good and the body is good and it's just a knocking motor, buy that thing and get you a motor for it and have somebody put it in, or put it in yourself, because you probably spend $1,500, $2,000 putting a newer motor in it. Or you can get a Jasper motor, you can get one rebuilt, you can get that one rebuilt. There's so many options to it. So I would say that that's another bargaining chip. Hey, this thing's got a little knock to it. I'll give you $1,500, and then all of a sudden you got Jeep $1,500, you put a motor in it, you're good to go. All right, so once you've been over the Jeep that you're looking at and you've gone through it and you've punched holes in it and you've done everything else, now's the time to decide if it's what you really want. Because let's get to the realization here. These things are literally buckets of bolts. I've owned several of them. They are the most horrifically riding vehicles. They drive terribly. They change lanes on their own. They leak in the rain. The wind blows straight through them, and it's usually on your right eyebrow, and your head freezes and you get freeze brain driving down the road in the winter. They're noisy. The soft top flaps around. They do all kinds of things terribly, except everything you want to do with them. In the summertime, you take the top off, they're amazing. They're fun to ride around in. You take the doors off, they're incredible to ride around in. You want to take this thing in the woods, take it in the woods. You want to take it on the beach, take it on the beach. You want to drive it from here to California, you're a beast. But go for it. Drive it from here to California. You can do that. They're reliable. They're simple. They're super simple. It's 2 axles, an engine, and a transmission with a bucket sitting on top of it. That's literally all these things are. You do have to consider that, though, when you're buying one of these things. If you think you're going to get out of your Escalade and have the same experience driving one of these down the road that you did with an actual, like, touring vehicle or luxury vehicle, you're sorely mistaken. Do not buy one of these things unless you know what they're about. Find a friend who has one. Test drive it down the highway when it's windy out and see if it's something you still want to get into. There's a whole lot of reasons not to buy one of these things, but then again, there's a whole lot of reasons to buy them. Each and every one of these things has its own story. Each and every one of them has its own little, you know, vibe and own little quirk and whatever else, and they're really cool. They're really cool, crappy vehicles. I mean, it's just, that's how it is. And if you're okay with that, then these things it's gonna be a blast for you. You're gonna have the greatest time in the world, and, you know, getting caught in the rain with the top down and being able to flood the thing up to the dash and just drain it out and keep going. And you know, there's so many cool things that can be done with these. They're definitely a vehicle that's gonna put your life in a whole different adventure. You know, it'll take you on a different adventure. And for that, you know what? Buy them. They're great. They're amazing. They have soul. You know, there's a lot of really cool things about these that the newer Wranglers don't have anymore. You know, the newer Wranglers have power everything and computers and big screens and all kinds of other crap, where this thing, you put the key in, and if you take a corner fast enough, the keys fall out of it. You know, and that's all a part of that experience. So 97 to 06 Jeep Wrangler, probably one of the best and worst vehicles you will ever own in your entire life. And if you know a little bit about what to look for when you go to buy one, then you're gonna save yourself a whole lot of time, a whole lot of money, and a whole lot of hassle. So hope you guys enjoyed that video. If you have any more questions on these things, please leave it down in the comments section, and I will try to answer as many of these as I possibly can. But this gives you just a little glimpse of what it's like to be around one of these things and buy one of these things, and some of the stuff to look out for so that you don't get screwed in the pocket. And hopefully it gets enough of the information across to you. So I didn't really get into any of the other issues with these things like leaking water, and because they do that. And what I just said earlier, that's exactly what they do. It's the best and worst vehicle you'll ever own in your life. So with that being said, I think I've talked enough. I'm going to get going, go home, edit this video, and hopefully it'll be up later this afternoon, or maybe I'll put it up on Sunday just so that everybody sees it. I don't know. We'll figure it out. But anyway, I wanted to get this in there, give you guys a little bit of help. Thank you very much to John from the Blacktop Boondockers for suggesting that I do this. It was a really good idea. And I don't know, maybe we'll do another video in another 6 months or something. It's just so crazy. We have 9 Jeeps here right now. So if you're calling or you're emailing and I'm not getting back to you, I'm sorry. We have 9 of these things here now, and we're cranking full speed. So see you guys on the next one. Have a great night.